People laughed when they saw her stuffing dirty wool into cabin walls. It looked ridiculous, worthless. But what they didn't know is that trapped air inside wool can outperform solid wood in slowing heat loss. Months later, when temperatures dropped beyond measurable limits, that same trash insulation became the only reason her fire didn't die out. The joke quietly became survival. Most people only recognize a solution after it proves itself. Before that, it just looks wrong, out of place, unnecessary, even embarrassing. That's what makes this story different. Because what you're about to see isn't a sudden breakthrough. It's a quiet shift. A moment where something dismissed as useless starts behaving in a way no one expected. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it. As you watch, pay attention to the exact point where doubt stops making sense, and the logic underneath finally becomes clear. Before we go further, answer this in the comments. At first glance, would you trust something that looks worthless if your survival depended on it? Your answer helps this reach people who notice patterns before they become obvious. Now let's go back to a cabin where the cold didn't just surround the walls, it moved straight through them. A cabin that couldn't hold heat. Her name was Sigrid Lund. She arrived in Montana in the summer of 1886 with a job no one else wanted, a responsibility most people refused to take. A winter alone at a remote line camp, 12 miles from the main ranch, no neighbors, no quick help, just a small cabin and a flock of sheep to survive the season, with no margin for mistakes or second chances. The first time she stepped inside, she understood the problem immediately. The walls weren't walls, they were suggestions. Wind didn't come through cracks. It came through the wood itself. She could stand in the center of the room, hold out her hand, and feel air moving across her palm like an invisible current. 7 visible gaps. More she couldn't see. And winter hadn't even started yet. The arithmetic of survival. When she rode into town, she asked the only question that mattered, the one that would decide whether she lived or not. How much for firewood? 7 cords. That was the number every experienced man agreed on. Enough to survive a full Montana winter without freezing slowly. The answer came back simple. $19.25. She had 7. The storekeeper didn't soften it. You can afford 2 cords, he said. 2 cords meant 8 weeks of heat. Winter would last at least 16. That wasn't a gap. That was a sentence. She bought the 2 cords anyway, because that was all she could do. The warning. Hidden in a notebook. That night, she found something left behind. A small notebook, belonging to the man who had lived there before her, Jonas Bremer. He had faced the same problem. Not enough wood. Walls that leaked heat, no matter how hard he tried to fix them. He had tried to solve it, stuffed straw into the gaps. For a while, it worked. Then moisture came. The straw held damp. The cabin turned wet, cold, and toxic. By January, his notes became shorter, colder, weaker. The final entry had only 2 words. Still cold. They found him later. That notebook taught her one thing clearly. The wrong solution wouldn't just fail. It would kill you faster. The thing everyone ignored. September nights grew colder. Frost began forming inside the cabin. Not outside, inside. That was when she noticed it. The waste wool in the corner. Dirty, uneven, worthless by every market standard. The kind people burned or buried without thinking twice. She picked up a handful and pressed it into a gap in the wall. The draft stopped. Completely. Not slowed. Stopped. She pulled it back and watched how it behaved. Compressed into the seam. held its shape, didn't collapse, didn't let air pass through. And then something clicked. Wool didn't just block space, it trapped air, and trapped air held heat in a way nothing else around her could. The decision that looked like madness. No one else was doing this. That mattered. If it worked, why hadn't anyone tried it? That question sat with her for a long time, and she answered it honestly. People burned wool. They didn't study it. They never tested it. So the absence of proof wasn't proof of failure. It was proof no one had looked. So she started. One wall first, then another, then the ceiling, 3.5 inches thick, packed tight, held in place with thin wooden strips. The cabin began to smell like lanolin, strong, heavy, unavoidable. People who visited called it strange, even pointless. But she kept working. The hidden system. She didn't just insulate the walls, she prepared for failure. She kept extra fleece aside, not for comfort, for emergencies, because she understood something most people missed. The first plan is never perfect. Gaps will appear. Wood will shift. Wind will find a way in, eventually. And when it does, you need something ready. At the same time, she controlled her firewood carefully, measured every piece, reduced her burn rate, trusted the walls to do part of the work. Slowly, the numbers changed. 2 cords didn't last 8 weeks. They stretched to 10. The gap wasn't gone, but it was shrinking in a way that gave her time. When the storm came, the first real blizzard hit in November. Wind howled without pause. Temperature dropped fast. Inside the cabin, something remarkable happened. The walls held. The wool held. The storm was outside, not inside. That difference changed everything. Then a draft appeared, low on the north wall, a small gap she had missed. In calm weather, it would mean nothing. In a storm, it meant everything. She didn't panic. She used the reserve, packed wool into the seam, locked it in place. The draft disappeared. That moment mattered more than anything else, because it proved she could respond faster than the cold. The storm that tested everything. January came with a storm unlike anything before. The kind that didn't arrive. It consumed everything in its path. Temperature dropped beyond -50. The thermometer stopped working entirely. The air outside wasn't just cold. It was lethal to anything exposed for too long. Inside, her cabin held just above freezing. Barely, but enough. Enough to live. Enough to think. Enough to act. Then came the knocking. A man at the door, half frozen. 6 miles walked through that storm, hands white, feet white, on the edge of losing everything. She pulled him inside without hesitation and acted quickly. At the realization, he looked around that cabin, felt the warmth, understood immediately. "This works," he said quietly, not as a question, as a correction. Outside, barns collapsed. Animals froze. Men burned through wood that no longer worked properly in extreme cold. Inside that cabin, the air held. The heat stayed. The system worked. Not perfectly, but enough. And in a winter like that, enough was everything. They called it useless. They called it dirty. They called it something you throw away without thinking. But when the cold pushed past what fire alone could handle, when wood started disappearing faster than it could save them, when even experience stopped being enough, that trash stayed, quietly doing its job, holding heat, buying time, keeping something alive when everything else was failing. And that's the part most people miss. It wasn't strength that made the difference. It wasn't more resources. It was understanding something small before it became obvious. So, before you leave, answer this in the comments. What moment made you realize this wasn't luck, but logic? I read every answer. And the patterns in what you notice decide what story comes next. And if you're the kind of person who pays attention to details most people ignore, subscribe, because the next story won't look important at first either.